The meeting hall on Station Alpha 7 buzzed with nervous energy. Ambassador Lisa Grant sat at the small table marked Earth and tried not to feel out of place. Around her, representatives from dozens of alien species discussed trade routes and mining rights in languages that sounded like music, clicking sounds, or electronic beeps. 3 months had passed since humans made first contact with the Galactic Federation, and Lisa still felt like an outsider looking in. The Altarians looked like tall blue birds made of crystal. The vegans resembled walking trees with silver bark. The crystalline assembly members were living gemstones that spoke through light patterns. Each species had mastered space travel thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. They all looked at Earth's representative with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Class 12 Deathworld, Lisa heard someone whisper behind her. That was Earth's official rating in the Federation database. Most planets ranked as Class I or Class 2, safe and comfortable worlds where life grew easily. Class 12 meant Earth was so dangerous that most alien species would die within hours of landing there. The gravity was too strong, the weather was too violent, bacteria were too aggressive. Even the plants and animals were considered deadly by galactic standards. Council. Speaker Veltar of the Crystalline Assembly called for order. His body flashed with patterns of blue and white light as he spoke. We will now hear the monthly reports. From our newest members, Lisa had prepared her speech carefully. She talked about Earth's progress in building space stations and learning Federation technology. She mentioned the new trade agreements and the cultural exchange programs. But she could see the boredom in the aliens' faces. To them, humans were barely out of the Stone Age. The routine meeting was interrupted when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The universal translator systems announced an emergency in dozens of languages. At once, Admiral Zephyrine Blue of the Altarian Navy rushed into the chamber. His crystal feathers were dim with worry. Council members, we have received a priority distress signal from the Kepler 44 to C mining colony.
Alni.
The mood in the room changed. Instantly. Kepler 442c was one of the Federation's most important mining operations. Over 50,000 beings from 12 different species lived and worked there. It was supposed to be one of the safest places in Federation space. What is the nature of the emergency? Speaker Veltar asked. Admiral Zephyrine Blue activated a holographic display that showed the mining colony. What they saw made everyone gasp. The neat rows of buildings and mining equipment were covered in strange crystalline growths that pulsed with stolen energy. Moving between the structures were creatures that looked like living crystals with too many sharp edges. The Keth swarm has overrun the colony, the Admiral explained. These creatures consume technology and use it to make themselves stronger. They appeared 3 days ago and overwhelmed the automated defense systems within hours. Lisa had never heard of the Keth before, but the fear in the room was obvious. Several representatives backed away from the holographic display as if the creatures might somehow reach through it. How many survivors? Asked Ambassador Thel of the Vegan Republic. Our last communication indicated that approximately 4,000 colonists managed to reach the underground emergency bunkers. However, the Keth are systematically destroying the colony's infrastructure. The survivors have perhaps 10 days of life support remaining. The chamber erupted in worried conversations. Representatives spoke rapidly in their native languages. While the translation system struggled to keep up, Lisa listened as the scope of the disaster became clear. The Keth swarm was unlike anything the Federation had faced before. The creatures fed on the electromagnetic energy that powered most advanced technology. Wherever they went, computers failed, weapons stopped working, and communications went dead. They created a dead zone around themselves that made rescue operations nearly impossible. The nearest Federation fleet is 6 weeks away, Admiral Zephyrine Blue continued. By the time they arrive, the colonists will have been dead for over a month. What about local forces? Someone asked. All ships in the sector have been pulled back to a safe distance. The Keth's electromagnetic interference extends for 50 kilometers around the colony. Any vessel that gets closer will lose power and crash. Lisa felt her heart sink as she realized what this meant. 50,000 people were going to die, and the most advanced civilization in the galaxy could do nothing to save them. Speaker. Veltar's light patterns turned red with frustration. Are there any options? Any unconventional approaches that might work? The Admiral's feathers dimmed further. We have analyzed every possibility. The Keth are too numerous for a small strike force to handle. They disable any large ships before they can get close enough to help. Traditional rescue operations are impossible. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled on everyone. Lisa watched alien faces show emotion she recognized despite their strange appearances. Sadness, anger, and helplessness looked the same across all species. Then Speaker Veltar made a decision that would change everything. Send out a general distress call, he ordered. Broadcast it on all frequencies to every member species. Ask for any ideas, any technology, any approach that might save those colonists. Sir, the Admiral said carefully, we have already consulted our best tactical minds and engineers. If the Federation cannot solve this problem, what makes you think other species can help? Because Veltar replied, his lights pulsing with determination. Sometimes the answer comes from where you least expect it. Send the message. Emergency humanitarian aid requested. Technological solutions ineffective. Seeking unconventional approaches. Lisa watched as the message was broadcast across the galaxy. She knew that most species would receive it, analyze the situation, and conclude that nothing could be done. The Keth swarm had never been defeated without massive technological superiority. And no one had that kind of firepower close enough to help in time. But as she sat in that chamber surrounded by representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, Lisa began to think about the problem differently. Everyone was focused on what wouldn't work against the Keth. The creatures disabled advanced technology, so advanced technology couldn't save the colonists. It seemed logical, however. Lisa came from a world where logic didn't always apply. Earth was a planet where life survived by being stubborn, adaptable, and sometimes just plain crazy. Humans had learned to live in deserts, on ice sheets, and in the deepest jungles. They had climbed the highest mountains and dove to the bottom of the oceans. They did these things not because they had the best technology, but because they refused to give up. The meeting was ending when Lisa's communication device buzzed. Captain Jake Sullivan of the Earth vessel New Horizon was requesting an urgent conversation. Lisa excused herself and stepped into a private communication booth. Jake's weathered face appeared on the screen. He was a former military pilot who had been chosen to command humanity's first interstellar ship. The New Horizon wasn't much to look at compared to Federation vessels. It was built from steel and aluminum instead of exotic materials. Its computers were simple by galactic standards, and its weapons were basically just very fast projectiles. Lisa, I just heard about the colony situation, Jake said without preamble. I want to volunteer the New Horizon for the rescue mission. Lisa stared at him. Jake, you heard what they said. The most advanced ships in the galaxy can't get close to that place. You can't disable anything electronic. Jake smiled grimly. That's exactly why we might be able to help. Our ship isn't advanced enough to be stopped by their interference. Half our systems are manual backups anyway. We built them that way because we didn't trust the fancy stuff yet. For the first time. Since the crisis began, Lisa felt a spark of hope. The Federation's advanced technology was their weakness in this situation, but humanity's primitive approach might be exactly what the colonists needed. I'll talk to the Council, she promised. But Jake, you know they'll probably say no. They think we're too inexperienced for something this dangerous. Then we'll have to prove them wrong, Jake replied. 50,000 people are going to die if someone doesn't try something different. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's being different. The communication ended, and Lisa sat alone in the booth for a moment. Outside, she could hear the aliens discussing evacuation plans and memorial services for the colonists. They had already given up hope. But humans came from a death world. They had learned that sometimes hope was all you had, and sometimes that was enough. The Federation Council chamber erupted in shocked silence when Ambassador Lisa Grant announced humanity's offer to help. Speaker Veltar's light patterns flickered rapidly between blue and red, showing his confusion. Admiral Zephyrine Blue's crystal feathers dimmed to almost black. Ambassador Grant Veltar said carefully, "We appreciate Earth's willingness to assist, but this situation requires experienced personnel with advanced equipment. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 50 years. Lisa stood her ground. That's exactly why we might succeed where others have failed. Our technology isn't advanced enough for the Keth to disable it. Councilmember Saul of the Vegan Republic made a sound like wind through leaves. With respect, sending a Class 12 species into such danger would be genocide, not rescue. The Keth swarm has destroyed entire Federation fleets. Those fleets relied on technology that the Keth could turn against them, Lisa replied. Our ship runs on systems so simple that half of them are mechanical. We're not trying to fight the Keth with superior firepower. We're trying to outsmart them. Debate continued for hours. Most council members believed that humans would only add to the casualty count. They saw Earth's offer as brave but foolish. However, as the hours passed and no other solutions emerged, even the skeptics began to listen. Dr. Helen Park joined the discussion by holographic link from Earth. She was humanity's leading expert on alien biology, even though she had only been studying non-human life for 3 months. Her analysis of the Keith data revealed something that Federation scientists had missed. The creatures are vulnerable to rapid temperature changes, she explained to the council. They also show sensitivity to certain electromagnetic frequencies. But here's the key point. They adapt quickly to sustained attacks. Federation weapons fire continuously at stable frequencies. The Keth learned to resist them within minutes. Admiral Zephyrin Blue leaned forward. Are you suggesting that inconsistent attacks would be more effective? I'm suggesting that unpredictable attacks might work better than precise ones, Dr. Park replied. Human technology isn't precise by Federation standards, but it's adaptable. We can change our approach on the fly in ways that your automated systems cannot. The council took a recess to discuss the proposal privately. Lisa waited in the corridor outside, knowing that 50,000 lives hung in the balance. Every hour of debate was an hour less life support for the trapped colonists, Captain. Jake Sullivan arrived at Station Alpha 7 during the recess. He brought with him the crew he had assembled for the mission. Sergeant Tony Rodriguez was a Marine who had served in Earth's most dangerous combat zones. His scarred face and steady eyes showed someone who had seen the worst that humans could do to each other and survived it. Engineer. Kate Morrison was young but brilliant. She specialized in making things work under impossible conditions. Her toolkit contained hammers and welding torches alongside advanced diagnostic equipment. She believed that the best repairs were often the simplest ones. Communications Officer Ben Carter had kept radio contact open during hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. He knew how to maintain communications when conventional methods failed. His equipment was a mix of cutting-edge Federation technology and old Earth radio gear that could punch through any interference. Dr. Amy Chen was the team's medical officer. She had worked in field hospitals in war zones and disaster areas. She could perform surgery with basic tools and treat injuries that would challenge the best Federation medical facilities. Jake introduced his team to Ambassador Grant in the station's recreation area. The crew members looked out of place among the elegant alien architecture. Their equipment was bulky and practical rather than sleek and sophisticated. But Lisa could see the competence in their movements and the determination in their eyes. Lisa, we've been monitoring the Federation communications, Jake said. We know what we're up against. The Keth aren't just mindless creatures. They're learning from every piece of technology they consume. Dr. Chen pulled up her medical scanner readings. I've been analyzing the biological data on different Federation species. If the Keth are studying technology, they might also be studying the colonists themselves. We could be looking at something worse than just a rescue mission. Tony Rodriguez spoke up, and with respect, we've faced bad odds before. My unit once held a position against enemy forces for 3 days with no supplies and broken equipment. We made it work because we didn't follow the book. Sometimes you have to get creative. Kate Morrison nodded agreement. The Federation builds their ships to be perfect. Every system has backups and redundancies. Perfect systems fail in predictable ways. Our ship breaks down constantly, but we always find a way to fix it. Ben Carter was monitoring the distress. Signals from Kepler 44 to C. I'm picking up fragments of transmissions from the colony. The interference is getting worse, but I can still make out some voices. There are families down there, children. Lisa felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She knew that if the mission failed, humanity would be blamed for making a bad situation worse. Earth's reputation in the galactic community was already fragile. A disaster would set back human-alien relations by decades. But as she looked at Jake's crew, she realized something important. These people weren't volunteering because they wanted glory or recognition. They were volunteering because people needed help, and they had the skills to provide it. It was as simple and as complicated as that. The council reconvened after several hours. Speaker Veltar's light patterns were more subdued than before. The Federation Council has reached a decision. We will permit the human rescue attempt, but with conditions. Admiral Zephyrine Blue outlined the restrictions. The new Horizon will be accompanied by a Federation observer ship that will remain at safe distance. If the mission appears to be failing, the human vessel will withdraw immediately. We will not allow this rescue attempt to become a suicide mission. Lisa accepted the conditions, though she knew that Jake would make his own decisions once they reached Kepler 4 to see. The captain had made it clear that he wouldn't abandon the colonists as long as any chance of success remained back on Earth. The news of the mission sparked intense debate. President Connor Murphy supported the rescue attempt. In a televised address, "We're not doing this to prove anything to the galaxy," he said. "We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Those colonists aren't humans, but they're people, and people help each other when they're in trouble." However, Admiral Patricia Hayes of Earth Space Command disagreed with the mission. "We've been in space for less than a century," she told the president in a private meeting. "We're about to go up against something that has defeated civilizations with thousands of years of experience." "That's exactly why we might succeed," Murphy replied. "We're not bound by thousands of years of thinking about how things should be done. Sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects." The New Horizon began final preparations for departure. The crew loaded supplies that looked primitive compared to Federation's standard equipment. Medical supplies that required manual operation, communication gear that used radio waves instead of quantum entanglement, weapons that fired physical projectiles instead of energy beams. Dr. Park transmitted her final analysis of the Keth-2, the ship. Her research suggested that the creatures operated as a collective intelligence, sharing information across the entire swarm instantly. This made them incredibly efficient, but also potentially vulnerable to the right kind of disruption. As the New Horizon prepared to leave Station Alpha 7, Asa received one last communication from the colony. It was a young voice speaking. In broken Federation standard, words were simple but heartbreaking. "Thank you for coming to help us. My name is Solara. Please hurry." Jake Sullivan heard the message and felt something harden in his chest. This wasn't about politics or proving human worth anymore. It was about a scared child asking for help. He had children of his own back. On Earth, he knew exactly what Solara's parents were feeling right now. The New Horizon. Undocked from Station Alpha 7 with the entire galaxy watching. Most observers expected the humans to fail, but they hoped they would at least gather useful intelligence about the Kith before being forced to retreat. None of them understood that humans from a death world don't retreat when children are in danger. They had learned that lesson the hard way over thousands of years of surviving on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Now they were going to teach that lesson to the stars. The New Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 4 C system. Captain Jake Sullivan stared at the main screen and felt his heart sink. The mining colony that had once been a symbol of galactic cooperation was now a twisted nightmare of crystalline growths and pulsing energy. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Amy Chun from her position at the medical station. "What have they done to that place?" The planet's surface was covered in structures that looked like living coral made of metal and crystal. A Keth had consumed the colonies, buildings, and vehicles, turning them into part of their own bizarre architecture. Strange lights moved through the growths like blood through veins. Carrying the stolen energy from destroyed machines, engineer Kate Morrison ran her scanners. Over the planet's surface, "Captain, I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference. It's like a constant lightning storm down there." No wonder the Federation ships can't get through. Communications Officer Ben Carter was already working to establish contact with the survivors. His equipment crackled and hissed as he tried to punch through the interference. I'm getting fragments of signals from the underground bunkers. The colonists are still alive, but their power levels are dropping fast. Jake studied the tactical display. The Keth creatures moved across the planet's surface in complex patterns. Some were as small as dogs, scurrying between the crystalline structures. Others were massive, towering over the ruins like living buildings. All of them glowed with the energy they had stolen from the colony's technology. Sergeant Rodriguez, what's your assessment? Jake asked. Tony Rodriguez had been studying the Keth movement patterns for the past hour. His military training helped him see what others might miss. Sir, they're not moving randomly. There's a patrol schedule, guard rotations, even what looks like shift changes. These things are organized like an army. Dr. Helen Park's voice came through the communication. System from Earth. She had been analyzing the data the New Horizon was transmitting back home. Captain, I'm seeing something interesting in the Keth's behavior. They seem to avoid certain areas of the planet. Rocky canyons, underground rivers, places where the terrain is unstable. Jake felt the first spark of hope since arriving at the planet. They don't like difficult terrain. It gives us an advantage. The New Horizon began its approach to the planet, using the natural asteroid field around Kepler 44 to see as cover. Jake had learned this technique during Earth's early space exploration. When human ships were too primitive for sophisticated stealth technology, sometimes the old ways worked better than new ones. Kate Morrison made constant adjustments to the ship's systems as they entered the electromagnetic field surrounding the planet. Federation ships would have lost power completely, but the New Horizon's mechanical backup systems kept them flying. The lights flickered and the computers glitched, but the ship remained functional. Landing zone selected, Jake announced after, studying the surface scans. There's a canyon system about 5 kilometers from the main colony. Rocky terrain, lots of caves, and it looks like the Keth avoid it. The landing was rough. The ship's navigation systems were completely confused by the electromagnetic interference, so Jake had to fly by visual reference alone. He brought the New Horizon down in a narrow canyon between 2 rocky ridges. Hidden from the Keth sensors by the natural terrain, as soon as they landed, Tony Rodriguez began preparing for reconnaissance. He selected 3 Marines from the crew and equipped them with night vision goggles, basic radios, and weapons that would work without computer assistance. We're going old school, he told his team. No electronic targeting, no automatic systems, just eyes, ears, and common sense. The reconnaissance team left the ship after dark, when the strange aurora effects in the planet's atmosphere provided extra cover. They moved through the rocky terrain like ghosts, using techniques that human soldiers had perfected in Earth's most dangerous environments. What they found was worse than anyone had expected. The Keth weren't just consuming technology. Randomly, they were learning from it, incorporating the most useful pieces into their own bodies. Some creatures now had weapon systems grafted onto their crystalline shells. Others had developed new sensory organs that could detect heat, movement, and even electrical activity from living beings. They're evolving, Rodriguez whispered into his radio as he watched a group of Keth creatures patrol the colony's perimeter. Every piece of tech they eat makes them smarter and more dangerous. Ben Carter was working frantically to establish contact with the colonists. He had strung old-fashioned copper wire through the canyon system, creating a communication network that the Keth couldn't detect or disable. When he finally made contact with the main bunker, the relief in the colonists' voices was heartbreaking. Human. Vessel, this is Colony Administrator Valek of the Altarian Engineering Corps, came a weak voice through the static. We cannot believe anyone came for us. The Federation told us that rescue was impossible. Jake took the communication himself. Administrator Valek, this is Captain Sullivan of the Earth ship New Horizon. We're here to get you out. How many survivors do you have? 47,216 as of this morning's count, Valek replied. We're losing people every day. The children and elderly are suffering the most from the limited life support. Dr. Chen began analyzing the medical data that the colonists transmitted. What she found made her angry. "Captain, these people are dying from things we could easily treat. Dehydration, malnutrition, respiratory problems from poor air circulation. If we could get medical supplies to them, we could save hundreds of lives immediately." Jake made his first major decision of the mission. Instead of waiting to plan a full evacuation, they would begin immediate relief operations. "Kate, I need you to rig together some supply packages that we can deliver through the maintenance tunnels. Ben, map out every communication line and utility conduit between here and the main bunker." The maintenance tunnels were humanity's first stroke of luck. The colonial engineers had built them using materials that interfered with the Keth's electromagnetic senses. The creatures could detect the tunnel's existence, but they couldn't see inside them clearly. It was like trying to look through frosted glass. Kate Morrison worked through the night, creating supply packages using materials from the ship and emergency supplies the colonists had stored in outlying buildings. Medical supplies, water purification tablets, portable power cells, and communication equipment were bundled into packages small enough to move through the tunnel system. The first supply run was led by Dr. Chen and 2 Marines. They crawled through kilometers of narrow tunnels, dragging the supply packages behind them. The tunnels were hot, cramped, and filled with the mechanical noise of the colony's failing life support systems. When they finally reached the main bunker, the scene that greeted them was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Thousands of beings from a dozen different species were crowded into spaces designed for maybe a few hundred. Altarian families huddled together, their crystal feathers dim with exhaustion. Vegan children clung to their parents, their silver bark dulled by poor nutrition. Members of species that Jake had never seen before shared their water and food with neighbors who looked nothing like them. But what struck Dr. Chen most was the hope in their eyes when they saw the medical supplies. These people had been abandoned by their own government, left to die in the darkness. But they still believed that someone cared enough to help them. "Thank you," whispered a young vegan girl in broken Federation standard. "Thank you for not forgetting us." Dr. Chen knelt down beside the child and checked her vital signs with a simple medical scanner. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Solara." The girl replied, "I sent the message asking for help. Did you hear it?" Dr. Chen felt tears in her eyes as she realized this was the child whose voice had reached them across the galaxy. "Yes, we heard you, and we're going to get you out of here." But even as Dr. Chen worked to treat the sickest colonists, Tony Rodriguez was discovering a new problem. The Keth were adapting to human tactics faster than expected. The creatures had begun posting guards near the tunnel entrances. They were learning to detect the subtle vibrations that humans made when moving through the underground passages. Captain Rodriguez reported over the radio, "We may have stirred up a hornet's nest. The Keth are changing their patrol patterns. They know we're here, and they're trying to figure out how we're moving around without them seeing us." Jake realized that their window of opportunity was closing. The Keth collective intelligence was solving the puzzle of human infiltration techniques. Soon the tunnels wouldn't be safe anymore, and 47,000 people would be trapped with no way out. "Teams, prepare for accelerated operations," Jake ordered. "We're not just bringing supplies anymore. We're bringing people out. Ready or not, the real rescue mission starts now." As if to emphasize his point, the ship's sensors detected movement in the canyon above them. The Keth had found the New Horizons landing site. The creatures were gathering around the rocky ridges, their crystalline bodies glowing with stolen energy as they prepared to investigate this new puzzle that had appeared in their territory. The situation got worse fast. Captain Jake Sullivan watched his tactical display as red dots representing Keth creatures gathered around the New Horizons hiding place. The ship's sensors showed dozens of the crystal beings moving through the rocky canyon, their bodies pulsing with stolen energy as they searched for the intruders. "Captain, they found 3 of our tunnel entrances," Sergeant Tony Rodriguez reported from his position near the colony. "The creatures are posting guards at each one. They're learning our routes." Jake felt the weight of 47,000 lives pressing down on him. The original plan of slow, careful evacuation through the maintenance tunnels was no longer possible. The Keth collective intelligence had figured out human tactics faster than anyone expected. Dr. Helen. Park's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth. Captain, I've been analyzing the data you're sending back. The Keth aren't just learning your tactics. They're learning about human biology. Some of the creatures near your ship are developing new sensory organs that can detect body heat and carbon dioxide. Engineer Kate Morrison looked up from her workstation. Sir, if they're adapting that quickly, we need to change our entire approach. Instead of hiding from them, maybe we should give them something bigger to worry about. Jake understood what she meant. The Keth were focused on solving the puzzle of human infiltration because it was new and interesting to them. But what if the humans created a bigger puzzle that demanded their attention? What do you have in mind? Jake asked. Kate pulled up the colony's power grid on her screen. The Keth are using the colony's main power core as their central hub. All their stolen energy flows through that system. If we could overload it, cause some kind of massive feedback loop, it might disrupt their entire network. Communications Officer Ben Carter shook his head. Kate, that power core is in the center of the colony. It's surrounded by thousands of Keth creatures. Getting close to it would be suicide. Not if we don't go directly, Kate replied. The colony has backup power stations scattered around the perimeter. If we could rig them to send power surges back toward the main core, we might create enough chaos to cover a full evacuation. Dr. Amy Chen was monitoring the medical situation in the bunkers. We're running out of time for careful plans. I'm getting reports of system failures in 3 separate bunkers. People are starting to die from carbon dioxide poisoning. Jake made the hardest decision of his career. Instead of continuing the slow infiltration, they would launch a full assault on the Keth positions. It went against every military principle he had learned, but sometimes desperate situations required desperate solutions. All teams, listen. Up, Jake announced over the radio. We're changing the mission parameters. Instead of hiding from the Keth, we're going to make them chase us. Kate, I need those power station overloads. Ben, prepare to broadcast on every frequency you can manage. Tony, get ready for the loudest, most confusing attack you can think of. The plan was controlled chaos. Kate Morrison began rigging explosive devices using mining equipment and construction materials instead of military ordnance. The Keth had learned to recognize human weapons, but they might not understand mining charges and welding torches used as weapons. Ben Carter prepared to flood the electromagnetic spectrum with every kind of signal he could generate. Radio broadcasts, sonar pings, even old Earth music played at maximum volume. The goal was to overwhelm the Keth's sensory systems with information they couldn't process. Tony. Rodriguez gathered every Marine on the ship and began planning what he called the most unprofessional military operation in human history. Instead of coordinated attacks, each team would act independently, striking random targets with no apparent pattern. The beauty of this plan, Tony explained to his Marines, is that there is no plan. We're going to hit them with pure chaos. Every team does something different, something unexpected. The Keth collective intelligence will try to find patterns in our attacks, but there won't be any patterns to find. Dr. Chen prepared medical stations at multiple locations around the colony. She couldn't predict where injured people would end up during the chaos, so she placed supplies everywhere she could reach. The assault began at dawn. Kate Morrison's mining charges exploded at the colony's eastern power station, sending a massive energy surge toward the main power core. The explosion lit up the sky and sent Keth creatures scurrying in all directions at the same time. Ben Carter began his broadcast assault. Every speaker in the colony suddenly blared with Earth rock music, weather reports, children's songs, and military radio chatter. The cacophony was so loud that human ears rang. But the Keth creatures seemed to find it physically painful. Tony Rodriguez's Marines struck from 6 different directions simultaneously. One team used flamethrowers to create walls of fire that confused the Keth's heat sensors. Another team threw smoke grenades that blocked both human and alien vision equally. A third team simply ran through Keth positions, yelling and shooting in the air, creating maximum noise and confusion. The effect on the Keth was immediate and dramatic. The creatures had evolved to process information as a collective, sharing data instantly across their network. but the human assault was giving them too much contradictory information to process. The collective intelligence began to break down, as different groups of creatures received conflicting instructions. Jake watched from the new horizon as the colony descended into controlled chaos. Keth creatures ran in circles, trying to respond to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The precise patrol patterns disappeared as the collective struggled to understand what was happening now. Jake ordered all evacuation teams move out. The evacuation was unlike anything in Federation history. Instead of orderly withdrawals through designated routes, humans and colonists moved through the chaos like water flowing around rocks. Dr. Chen led medical teams that treated injured people while moving. Kate Morrison guided groups of colonists. Through holes she blasted in walls with mining charges. Ben Carter maintained communications by shouting instructions over his loudspeakers. The most dangerous part was reaching the main bunker where young Solara and thousands of other colonists waited. The bunker was located directly under the colony's central power core, surrounded by the largest concentration of Keth creatures. Jake made the decision to lead this mission personally. He took a small team through the maintenance tunnels while the chaos raged above them. The tunnels were hot and filled with smoke from the explosions, but they were still the safest route to the main bunker. When they reached the bunker, Jake found a scene that broke his heart. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were packed into a space designed for emergency shelter, not long-term living. The air was thick and stale. Children cried from hunger and fear. Adults tried to comfort each other despite their own terror, but when the colonists saw Jake and his team, hope returned to their faces. These people had been abandoned by their own government, left to die in the darkness. Now humans from a death world had come to save them. "Everyone listen," Jake announced in his command voice. "We're getting you out of here, but we need to move fast. Follow my people, stay close together, and don't stop for anything." Administrator Velik approached Jake with tears in his crystalline eyes. "Captain Sullivan, how can we ever repay this debt? Your people are risking everything for strangers." Jake looked around at the frightened faces surrounding him. Tarian families holding their children close. Vegan elders sharing their water with young ones. Species he had never seen before, helping each other despite their differences. "Owe us anything," Jake replied.
No.
"This is what people do for each other." The evacuation of the main bunker began as the chaos above them reached its peak. Kate Morrison's power surges had caused a cascade failure in the Keth energy network. Creatures throughout the colony were becoming sluggish and confused as their stolen power supplies fluctuated wildly, but the Keth were also adapting. Some creatures began moving toward the bunker, drawn by the vibrations of so many people moving through the tunnels. The collective intelligence was slowly figuring out that the real target wasn't the power stations or the random attacks. Target was the colonists themselves. Jake realized they were in a race against time. The Keth would soon understand what the humans were really doing, and when that happened, the chaos would end. The creatures would focus all their attention on stopping the evacuation, as if to confirm his fears. The ground above them began to shake. Keth creatures were digging through the rock and metal, trying to reach the tunnels from above. The distinctive sound of crystalline claws scraping against stone echoed through the bunker. "Move faster," Jake ordered. "Yes, they're coming." The sound of Keth claws scraping through metal and stone grew louder as Captain Jake Sullivan led the evacuation through the maintenance tunnels. Above them, the creatures were digging down from the surface, trying to reach the colonists who were moving through the underground passages like a river of frightened beings. "Captain, they've broken through Sector 7, Sergeant Tony Rodriguez reported over the radio. His voice was strained from hours of combat. "The tunnel is blocked. We need another route." Jake consulted the colony blueprints that engineer Kate Morrison had downloaded to his portable display. The map showed dozens of tunnel branches, but the Keth were learning fast. Every route they blocked forced the evacuation into narrower and more dangerous passages. "Ben, how many people have we got now?" Jake asked Communications Officer Ben Carter. 38,000 so far, Ben replied. "But the last 9,000 are in the deepest bunkers. The Keth are concentrating their efforts there."
Dr.
Amy Chen's voice came through the radio from one of the medical stations. Jake, we have a problem. Some of the colonists are too weak to make the journey through the tunnels. The elderly and sick are collapsing from exhaustion. Jake felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. They could save the strong and healthy, or they could try to save everyone and risk losing them all. It was the kind of decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But then he remembered something his grandfather had told him about World War II. "Nobody gets left behind," the old man had said. "That's what makes us human. We carry them," Jake announced. "Anyone who can't walk gets carried. Anyone who can't carry someone helps in other ways. We'll all go home together." Evacuation became a chain of people helping people. Altarian adults carried vegan children on their shoulders. Human Marines supported elderly crystalline assembly members who could barely move. Species that had never met before worked together to move the weakest. Colonists through kilometers of dark tunnels. Young Solara walked beside Dr. Chin, holding the hand of a human Marine who had been injured in the fighting above. The little vegan girl had become a symbol of hope for everyone in the tunnels. Her presence reminded them why they were fighting so hard to escape. Kate Morrison was working frantically at the colony's main power core, trying to create one final massive disruption that would buy them time to evacuate the last groups. The power core was a cathedral-sized chamber, filled with energy conduits and crystalline keth growths that pulsed with stolen electricity. "Kate, get out of there," Jake ordered over the radio. "The building is coming down. Almost finished." Kate replied, sweat dripping as she connected the last wires to her improvised overload device. "This should cause a feedback loop that will shut down their entire network for at least an hour." But the Keth had finally understood the human strategy. Instead of chasing the diversions and random attacks, they began moving all their forces toward the evacuation routes. The collective intelligence had solved the puzzle of human tactics. Massive Keth warriors, some as large as buildings, began converging on the tunnel entrances. Their crystalline bodies glowed with accumulated energy as they prepared to seal off every escape route simultaneously. Jake realized they were trapped. The last 9,000 colonists were still underground, but the Keth were about to cut off all their exits. The creatures had learned to think like humans, and now they were using that knowledge against them. "All teams, we have a new problem," Jake announced. "The Keth are blocking our exit routes. We need a new plan, and we need it fast." Dr. Helen Park's voice came through from Earth with an idea that sounded completely insane. "Captain, the Keth. Collective intelligence is their greatest strength, but it might also be their weakness. If you could cause enough feedback in their network, the entire swarm might shut down temporarily." Kate Morrison understood immediately. The power core overload won't just disrupt their energy supply. It will send a massive shock through their neural network. Every Keth creature on the planet will feel it. "How long would they be down?" Jake asked. "Unknown," Dr. Park replied. "But probably long enough to get everyone out if you move fast." Jake looked around at the frightened faces surrounding him in the tunnel. Children who had been brave throughout the entire ordeal were finally starting to cry. Adults were beginning to despair as they realized how desperate their situation had become. "Kate, trigger the overload," Jake ordered.
"Sir."
"I'm still in the power core chamber. If I set this off, I won't make it out in time." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He had sworn that nobody would be left behind, but now he was asking one of his own people to sacrifice herself for the mission. "I'll do it," he said. "You get back to the ship." "No, Captain," Kate replied firmly. "This is my plan, my responsibility. Besides, you're needed to lead the evacuation. I'm just the engineer." Before Jake could argue, Kate triggered her device. The explosion was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Instead of a normal blast, the power core erupted in a cascade of electromagnetic energy that spread through every Keth creature on the planet. Simultaneously, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Every Keth warrior stopped moving at the same instant. The creatures that had been digging through the tunnels suddenly went silent. The massive beings blocking the exit routes collapsed like puppets with cut strings. "Now," Jake shouted, "everyone move. We have maybe an hour before they recover." The final evacuation was a mad dash through tunnels filled with unconscious Keth creatures. Colonists climbed over the bodies of their former captors, moving toward the surface and freedom. Jake carried an elderly Altarian on his back while helping a group of vegan children navigate through the debris. When they finally reached the surface, the sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrifying. The New Horizons sat in the canyon surrounded by hundreds of unconscious Keth creatures. But in the distance, more Keth were already beginning to stir as the electromagnetic shock wore off. The boarding process was chaotic but efficient. 1,000 beings from dozens of species crowded into a ship designed for maybe 100 humans. They filled every corridor, cargo bay, and empty space available. The life support systems groaned under the load, but they held. Dr. Chen worked frantically. To treat the most seriously injured colonists, her medical bay was overflowing, so she set up treatment stations throughout the ship. Altarian engineers helped repair damaged systems. Vegan botanists shared their knowledge of air purification. Every species contributed whatever skills they could offer. Young Solara found Jake on the bridge as he prepared the ship for departure. The vegan girl looked up at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. "Captain Jake," she said in her careful Federation standard, "why did your people come for us? We are not humans. We are not your responsibility." Jake knelt down to meet her at eye level. "Solara, when someone calls for help, you help them. It doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from. That's what good people do." New Horizon lifted off from Kepler 44 to sea just as the Keth began to recover. The creatures watched from the ground as their prey escaped, but they made no attempt to pursue. The electromagnetic feedback had taught them that humans were more dangerous than they appeared. 3 weeks later, Jake stood before the Federation Council once again. But this time, the chamber was filled with grateful colonists and their families. Ambassador Lisa Grant watched with pride as representatives from dozens of species praised humanity's courage and sacrifice. Speaker Veltar's light patterns were warm and welcoming as he addressed the assembly. The council formally recognizes Earth as a full member of the Galactic Federation. It's not despite their origins on a Class 12 death world, but because of what those origins represent. Admiral Zephyrin Blue stood to deliver the final judgment. The call was indeed for anyone who could help. But it took Deathworlders to show us that sometimes the best solution isn't the most sophisticated one. It's the one delivered by people who refuse to let others suffer when they have the power to act. Jake accepted the Federation's gratitude with quiet dignity. He knew that Kate Morrison had paid the ultimate price for their success, and her sacrifice would never be forgotten. But he also knew that her death had saved 47,000 lives and changed the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. As the ceremony ended, Jake felt a small hand slip into his. Solara stood beside him, no longer the frightened child from the bunker, but a symbol of hope for the future. "Will you visit my new home on Earth?" she asked. "I'd be honored," Jake replied. The galaxy had learned that Deathworlders don't abandon people in need. They had also learned that sometimes the most primitive solution is the most effective one. But most importantly, they had learned that courage and compassion were more valuable than any advanced technology. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or diplomats, but as the people you called when the impossible needed to be done and no one else was willing to try.